The last time we worked on the wagon in episode 3, we roughed in the rear axle and put it at 6 degrees of pinion angle. In this episode, we're going to go ahead and start getting the transmission in place and finding out what we need to do for a crossmember. We may need to build a new one, but I'm really hoping that we can just modify the old one to work with the AW4. Once we have that figured out, we can find out what the transfer case output shaft angle needs to be to see if it matches up to that 6 degrees of pinion angle or if we need to change it before final welding the spring purchase. Once all of that's complete, we can finally begin stripping down that Dana 44 high pinion and finding out exactly what it needs to be mounted under the front end of this car. Thanks for tuning in to ZF's Garage. Let's get started. Don't pay attention to this. Previous owner had this in an off-road Jeep, so some things are not the way they should be. That's okay. We'll figure it out. Where did that wrench? Oh, I left it on the other side of the car. Didn't I? Oh, nope, I was laying on it. For a second there, I thought this bolt was stripped. I was starting to get a little worried. It's fine. All right. AW4 is not secure. Okay. AW4 is not secure, but first step is there. Now to move on to the second step, and then the third step, and at some point we'll get to the 10,000th step and realize, well, it's all gonna come back out. Yep. All right, we've got the transmission jack out from underneath of the car. I've got a jack stand with a block right here on the pan. And the bend of this oil pan's right there, so I have no concerns of it going anywhere, denting anything, hurting anything. Now, our existing transmission crossmember from the old transmission ran from these two holes here over to here. Now, that is where the transmission mount was on the old transmission. It was a forward sump transmission pan that was a lot smaller than this. So I'm thinking we might be able to just cut out a little, kind of a crescent shape, but not really. I guess it's like a half rectangle shape for the old crossmember to clear this trans pan, and then we can extend it with some flat plate to come over here and mount to the Cherokee style transmission mount. I like this mount more, I think. This is kind of like an engine mount, so it's going to absorb quite a bit of shock. So I think we'll try to use that style. So we've got 11 inches from this bolt hole center, and that'll give us about a ½ inch clearance here. We'll say 21 inches. So we'll put a 10-inch cut in it, starting at 11 inches. Now that we've got the transmission crossmember up on the table, I'm going to go ahead and get marked and start cutting away at it. This is the bottom, obviously, so I plan on making a cut down and across and then back up to take a chunk out. It'll be this whole width from about here to here based on what the rule is saying. I've got about 11 inches right here. So I think I'll start the cut at about 10. It'll give us a little bit of extra room. And then 21 inches is over here in no man's land. Once I cut all this off, I'll go ahead and come in and put in some flat plates to cap these off to put that rigidity back in it. I don't think we're going to lose the rigidity by cutting this out, but I'm a big fan of make it beefier than you think you have to. Case in point, 1-ton axles on an AMC Eagle. Now, this isn't going to be perfectly straight. Kind of know this going in. But this is kind of one of those horseshoe and hand grenades kind of projects. And I think eyeballing it will be just fine. So we've got the Crossmember in. The cuts worked out great. I've got plenty of room to the sides of my pan. We're going to have to change something for this front drive shaft. Where it's sitting right now, this is not going to work. That front differential is going to be so much lower that our drive shaft's going to have to pass through here at least some, especially if we're in a situation where we're flexing and that front axle's down. We're going to have to figure out a hoop here. So I'm hoping we can just do a small one and leave some room out here for putting our lower control arm. I really want the lower control arms mounted here. We'd have to figure something out on this side. Might just be able to, put a piece of steel in here, reroute the exhaust some other way. That way we can get that lower control arm mounted here as well. I don't really want to mount them to the unibody frame. Our upper control arm will be mounted somewhere up there. I think we're going to go to about a 70% of the lower control arm length. It really depends on what this car is going to allow. We don't have a ton of room for packaging. Right now the plan is going to be to extend this, just bring a piece of plate out to probably about here, and then make a mount that'll just go up to that transmission to hold it in place, and then obviously beef it up, put some gussets in there and stuff, whatever's needed to make sure it's going to be secure. We are going to go ahead and get the Dana 44 stripped down and prepped for some fabrication to see if we can get it kind of roughed in for that front end. The front axle's in. I went ahead and set it up on all our center lines. So this is exactly where this axle should go. It might change a little bit, just I might be a hair off here or there, but pretty well sure it's centered. We check the line here versus the center point of our axle tubes, as well as the line going down the length of the car is centered up with the line that we put on the axle tube itself. So this is where this axle should ride. We can start looking at how we're going to do our lower control arms. We can go ahead and get working on final fab of that transmission cross member, start roughing this guy in, get it connected to the car. I went ahead, I put our spring perches in that we're going to use on the front. I think we're going to go ahead and bite the bullet on this frame. It's so far gone. I don't think it's worth welding everything into it and having to cut it out, you know, when it fails the rest of the way. This side's not too bad, but it's certainly not good. That side over there is trash. It's gone. So we'll start looking at that. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. The transmission cross member and the front axle are kind of roughed in to the point where now we know what we need to do to fabricate and get started on locating this front axle. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the lower control arms as well as that modification to the cross member. I am going to go ahead and pull the engine, trans, T-case, everything out of this car so I can cut the front subframe out and replace it. The rust on the driver's side is just a little too far gone for me to feel comfortable taking this car on long trips. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done while we're this far in. I don't want to get the car together just to tear it right back apart and cut a bunch of welds off. Thanks for tuning in to ZF's Garage. I'll see you in the next one.